those at home and those in the committee, I appreciate your patience and thank you for standing by. I really appreciate it. And now I'll hand it off to Kelly so that we can go ahead and do the staff update, and then we'll move towards the long-range facilities plan update.
Okay, so as far as my staff update goes, we don't, well, I shouldn't say we don't have a lot of stuff. We actually have quite a bit of things that are going on right now. But we did present the CBOC audit report at the previous meeting this evening, and the CBOC received the actual document in March and had an opportunity to review it and provide several questions for the auditor as well as staff. And we had an opportunity to answer those questions and actually review the document last meeting, which was the meeting before tonight. CBOC did not receive or accept the document because they still wanted clarifications on funding that was identified in the audit report for the Williamson site property. And so I will report back to them after I get clarification as to where and why that was reported in the Measure E report when previously it was not reported there. So then also we have 3 active construction, large active construction projects that are ongoing right now. The largest being the Thornton Middle School expansion and modernization. And so we actually hit a very huge milestone this week where we now have vertical movement coming out of the ground. So if you guys were to drive by Thornton this week, you'll see the skeleton being assembled for the structure of the two-story buildings. So pretty exciting. They had some roofing members attached today, and the vertical members for 8 corners of 2 of the buildings were installed on Monday and Tuesday. So hopefully by week's end, they'll actually be the full footprint and layout of, I believe it's building D, already erected. So we're pretty excited about that because once that happens in this particular phase of construction, you're going to start to see the building skin, or what we refer to as the building envelope, being assembled. And because this particular wall system for this structure is a pre-assembled system, it's kind of like a Lego project. You're going to start seeing big pieces of the building just be delivered daily and assembled. And so hopefully by summer's end, we will have the exterior skin and several of the windows and the framework of the HVAC systems actually in place by the end of the summer. So that's really, really good news, and we're really excited about that. The other really big thing that happened this week is that Hopkins project was actually increment 3, which is the modernization portion of Hopkins, was actually bid last week. And we received 3 bids, and our parent low bidder came in on budget to what we had designed to. And so we were very excited about that because we've had so many cost overruns and challenges with several of the other projects that predated this one. So with some of the strategies that we employed last summer and some of the resequencing and restructuring of how the projects were being designed, we're now starting to actually see the fruits of those labors come to fruition. So we were very, very excited, and we will formally present that to the board next week for award to our parent low bidder. We have some regulatory items that we have to finish up before I actually make the announcement of the contractor, but I just wanted to share that with you all, that we are making progress and we are kind of turning the corner on some of these projects to really start seeing major progress. The other thing that's happening this week is we have our solar team, as well as our Prop 39 and our, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the terminology, our long range facilities team and our Sizerco Energy folks have been working with our sites and our maintenance and operations staff all over break and also this week to actually do site audits at various sites to gather the data and complete their assessment reports. They're doing energy studies, they're looking at existing conditions, and they're working very closely with M&O to gather and compile historical data on our energy usage to complete the overall designs for all of our various sites throughout the district, for us to begin to put the framework together for the solar implementation that the board was, passed last month for us to begin that process. So I'm trying to think of what else it's been a busy week for me so far, but those are the main highlights that I think everybody should be very happy and pleased with. And you guys can share with the community that we've done some really good work, and you all should be very happy with some of the products that have been built and the progress that we're making, that you guys will see over the summer. Oh, I know, I forgot, the Washington High School Theater is actually 57% complete. So that's a huge milestone as well, because that project is actually on schedule based on when we initially started this project last November. So we're very excited about that, and anxious to see the formation and the coming together of the interior of the theater. So you guys, if you happen to want to stop by, just give me a jingle and we can arrange for you all to, see the site, and of course have all your safety gear and PPE in place if you choose to do that. But I will see if I can get some video or either some progress photos to share with you all at our next meeting, so you can see the progress that has been made from kind of where we started, what it looked like during demo, when it was a totally cleaned out space, to now becoming a very apparent theater that I think everyone will be very pleased with when it's all said and done. And we were talking with the principal last week, and so he's pretty excited because we can actually confidently plan, barring COVID, and any pandemic restrictions, hopefully using it for the fall Christmas program. So we'll keep you guys posted and stay tuned for having the opportunity to be able to do that. But that's all based on if we have full access and opportunity to have the students back in school in the fall. So with that, that is my staff update and other matters. And if there's any other questions you guys have about some of the things I've reported out on, please feel free to ask me.
Since I work there, I would love to get a tour, unless I need to talk to Bob.
You know what, the fastest and easiest is to go ahead and talk to Bob, because he's there every day and he has access to the site staff, and they can make that happen for you.
Yeah, I can sneak in, but I'm anxious to see it. We've been waiting a long time for it.
Well, I think you guys will be pretty excited. It's pretty awesome. I'm kind of geeky when it comes to this kind of stuff. I love this phase of construction, because that's when everything rises up off the paper and actually becomes a three-dimensional, touchable, feelable object. So pretty cool.
And Kelly, can you
You guys pat yourselves on the back. You all did a wonderful job passing that bond, and your students and community will definitely love you guys for it. So.
And Kelly, can you remind the public what CBOC stands for, and
the
generally what they're in charge of?
Sure. CBOC stands for the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, and that is a committee that is a regulatory requirement for the district to have, and it is comprised of members of the community, and of course myself and another staff member who report out to that committee, and they monitor the progress and expenditures of the bond dollars to ensure that they are spent on appropriate projects, and that we comply with all the regulations and statutes of the measure that were the requirements of the bond.
Thanks. Brian?
Kelly, I was wondering if you could talk to some of the Prop 51 funding that has come back into the bond fund, I think.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Brian, for reminding me. I like I said, it's been a busy week and I forgot about that. So We did receive a little over $16 million back from the state of California last month. And as I have been reporting out since, I guess, late August, we kind of, the money trickles in. And so these are dollars that we had applied for many, many, many years ago. And what has happened, because we had the bond measure, we actually utilized bond funds to implement some of the projects. And so the state has now what we call funded or allocated dollars for our projects that we applied for back in 2012, 2013, 2014. Now those dollars are being reallocated back to Fremont. So we received, like I said, about $16 million last month, and that has been redeposited back into the project or program contingency for Measure E. So last month we were kind of tenuous and very fretful that we were running out of reserves, and so now the coffers have been replenished with those state dollars that were released back to us and now have been put back into the program to now offer a little bit more security and having some contingency available for us to finish our projects and move forward confidently without fear of misstepping and not having sufficient funding to complete our current projects. So that was, and then the other thing is we also had dollars, I believe it was the Brookville Elementary School project that actually reimbursed our fund 25, which is our developer fund fee, which also was very low and now has been replenished with about $3.3 million that we previously did not have. So, and we're anticipating getting additional dollars towards the end of the year. And I believe I'll be reporting out on Prop 51 in June with what the school has actually received to date, what we currently applied for this year, as well as what we've actually received within this academic calendar year. So all in total, since 2013, I believe the district has received about $114 million in reimbursable expenses that we've received from that time coming forward. And we're anticipating getting about another, I want to say it's close to $54 million over the next 5 years for various projects that we've already applied for. And hopefully we'll get our apportionment from the governor's state allocation board. So yes, I see Mary has a question, but Antonio, go ahead.
Mary is clapping, I believe. Liz?
Oh, okay.
Liz, you're on mute.
There we go. So what I understand is that state funds come to us as a state match, sort of
Correct.
a dollar for dollar. And of course, this is a $650 million bond program. So is that to say that we should be expecting 325 mil in state match funds?
No, that is not an assumption that would be correct. So with the state matching dollars, there were projects that were previously submitted to the state for matching funding. And the state every year evaluates all of the projects that are submitted statewide. So for example, if the governor's budget comes out in May and they say, hey, we're going to fund $9.5 billion worth of projects. Well, Fremont will be in line along with all the other school districts statewide who have submitted applications, and the state will then say, okay, we'll approve this one, and this one, but we're not going to look at the other 15 that you submitted. So it's on a annual case-by-case basis. And so these dollars that we're seeing were dollars that we had requested state matching funds for prior to the bond actually being approved and executed. So it's not a dollar for dollar match for bond dollars, but it's a 50% match for projects that we had already identified and requested funding for, that we took portions of the bond to fund because either they were critical or, you know, major expenditures that needed to immediately be addressed. And now that the state has said, okay, we're funding that, you're 50%, we're now going to replenish and replace those bond dollars that were taken for those specific projects, but not for the bond per se as a whole. So it's very specific and limited as to how projects are chosen and the ones that were identified prior to the implementation of the bond that we currently have.
Yes, and they can only reimburse as they get applications for, and
Exactly.
and sometimes, you know, they obviously, some people come first in line if their needs are of a more emergency type of a nature as compared to our needs. But with so many bond dollars out there across the state, there's competition, and I do wonder if you know, when we'll get our next allotment from the state, if we'll get another allotment from the state, only
Well,
because
the nice
funds
thing
may not be
is,
available.
Sorry, I just want to, Kelly, if you can go ahead and respond, and then we'll move on to the next item.
no, I was
since we're
going to
over
say
time.
that's why the district has lobbyists that work for us to actually work on the process that you're specifically talking about, Liz, so that they're constantly in Sacramento and lobbying for our needs and making sure that we're kind of seen and heard with regard to how those dollars are being allocated. So we're very much aware of that. And yes, you're right, we're in competition with everybody. So fortunately, the ones that we've submitted from, you know, 10 years ago are finally getting funded. So we're jumping for joy over that. So.
All right, everybody, and that concludes that item of the agenda. I want to apologize to Douglas Davis in responding that you had your own, you know, essentially item of the agenda that you could present on. I failed to realize we should have just moved it up so that you could depart earlier. But otherwise, we're here now.
No worries. This is how these meetings work out, so I'm totally fine.
Okay, so we're now at the long range facilities plan update. So I'll hand it back to Kelly and Douglas to go ahead.
Okay, so with us tonight is Douglas Davis. He's one of the principal partners of AE3 Partners and the Steinberg Hart Partnership. They are our consultants who have been hired to do our long range facilities master plan update. And so I'm going to turn it over to Doug for him to share with you the progress that he and his team have been making since the first of the year. And as I said, there's a lot of activity in the last 2 weeks that a lot of our teams have been able to accomplish. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Let me get myself set up in presentation mode and get my screen shared here. So bear with me for one quick second as I do that. So it's in presentation mode, that's often. I get it on my this screen. Great.
Thank you. That makes the move over to this room more worth it. So I appreciate that you have a presentation.
And
All
Doug,
right,
you should be able to share your screen.
I think
turned
so.
off
So I'm
all the
sharing it
controls.
now.
Okay,
So does everybody kind of see the initial splash screen?
great.
Okay.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to give just kind of a quick high-level overview. So I know it's kind of late at night, so it's only 8 PowerPoint slides, and I'll go through them pretty quickly, so it won't be too long. And after that, if folks just want to interrupt if they have a pertinent question or wait to the end, that's fine either way. So anyway, A3 Partners, we're a 30-person firm, and we're leading this along with Steinberg Hart, which is a firm that we basically have a relationship going back 20 years. We've done a lot of master planning experience, but it's been mostly for college level. Steinberg Hart basically brings a lot more K through 12 level in it, and that's why we partnered together on this project. Cummings is basically coming on board as a cost estimator, and they've been a good source of information basically in the K through 12 arena. So the goal of the master plan update is you obviously have a master plan that was developed 5 years ago. It has reasonably good bones on it, but a lot of information has basically changed over time, you know, including the district's demographics. Obviously, programs have basically changed over the time in terms of not only the type of programs, but how exactly to utilize space. Changes in physical plant and condition. You know, buildings deteriorate, but projects also are completed and get done. And those variances basically need to be tracked. community and stakeholder feedback, obviously, in terms of how people and end users build facilities, it can change, and that's what we wanted to track as well. We know that coming into this thing, some of the bigger issues that we know we'll need to manage is the fact that the district enrollment appears to have leveled off, and that basically might change some of the demand for some certain facility types and space types. There are deferred maintenance issues, especially when it comes to HVAC and roof, which basically we're monitoring. I think everybody right now is trying to struggle with what is the educational environment going to look like post-COVID. There are transit things that basically will hopefully go away, but there might be some permanent impacts that everybody's analyzing. And then the district's decision that they may want to implement all-day kindergarten is part of it as well. So again, remember that this is it's a master plan update. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we're basically just trying to evaluate the parts of the plan that may be updated or changed, based upon the information that we have. And basically create a serviceable plan that will work for you for the next 5 years. I'll pause there for questions before I move on to the next slide. Okay. So one of the things that we decided to do at the start of this thing is we recognized that we were going to be in the COVID environment for a while, and we realized that everybody's working remotely, and obviously with the whole presence of COVID, it's going to be difficult for direct physical interaction. So one of the things that we decided to do is basically take advantage of all these tools and basically really make this more of a cloud-based survey tool that was easy to use. We recognize that everybody is incredibly pressed for time right about now, so we're trying to make it easy, fast, simple, and effective. So we worked with Kelly and her team to basically create an overall work plan and approach for the district. I think the big part of the cloud we had to develop is just the questionnaires, is the types of questions we're asking, how we're asking them. We certainly want to get into the weeds enough to get some detail, but we also want to make sure that we're measuring and asking the exact same questions uniformly across. That allows us to basically compare data essentially between campuses. We've set up the website, which I think some of you have seen, www.fremontunified4.org. And it has two parts to it. It has an external portal, which basically can provide whatever information you want to give the general public on this. And the key part was an internal portal, which basically has the questionnaire tools, which has the workflow process, that has basically interview calendaring system, which is basically going to be virtual. And I think if you've seen your emails, we've announced at the district, and the big thing we're trying to do, and I'll get a little more detail on this in the next few slides, is we're trying to get everybody, the site leads, to register, at least get into the site by this coming Monday. And then the first step that we're trying to get everybody to complete the next week after that is the registration survey. And what the registration survey is just simply everybody telling us that, hey, these are our teams. These are the people that we want to be involved in this process, and I'll get into that a little bit more. And that allows us to go to the next step of basically then getting them into the survey tools, and then once the survey tools are completed, going through the actual interview process. So our goal is to really spend about the next couple months going through and completing the questionnaires, as well as basically doing the initial surveys, or completing the survey questionnaires, as well as doing the initial site visits as well. I want to be very clear that this represents the initial phase of data collection. There will be subsequent phases where once we have data collected and we can say, hey, here's what we discovered, here's what exists on the site. There'll be plenty of times for basically stakeholders, both internal and external, to review, comment, tell us what we've got right or wrong. But the first thing we got to do is get the lay of the land and just basically kind of see where exactly are we right now, and do it in a way which is consistent basically across all the campuses to make sure we're comparing absolute apples to apples. Any questions on that before I move on to the next slide?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So two questions actually. Number
Yeah.
one is when you say surveys and website, who's your intended audience for this service? Is this like a subset of administrative folks that know the sites, or this is public at large? Just want to understand that.
Well, that actually kind of gets us to the next slide. So essentially we have 3 tracks that are basically we're setting up. And these are the 3 main stakeholder groups that we'd like to set up at each individual site. And the first one is what we call programs in education. You know, they're the ones that are knowledgeable basically about what educational programs are basically being implemented at their site, how they're using space, you know, what are the perceived, you know, needs and demands basically resulting from educational programs. In our imagination, we were thinking that basically it'd be likely to be principal as well as the instructional lead, basically teacher that would basically represent that group. The second track is the maintenance and operations group, and that's basically kind of more exploring the physical plant. So we think basically the site maintenance lead as well as basically a regional maintenance lead would probably be the best representatives of that. And then there's a community engagement piece, and these would basically be folks that are not district employees. You know, these would be folks that represent essentially external stakeholders in terms of students and students as well as basically the parents and just the outside community. We were turning to you guys in terms of basically helping us select who would be the appropriate leads for each of these sites, which is why I have you guys on there. And we thought that, again, 2 people basically from the programs and education side, that's the first track, a couple people from the maintenance and operations side, and then a couple people from the community engagement side would give us pretty much a good oversight of just how folks feel inside and out basically about the facilities. And I'll stop there to see if that basically answers your question.
Because we have 2 minutes left, let me go to the next question and then the next question, and we may end up needing to extend this item given committee interest.
Okay.
Henry?
Hi, my name is Henry. I'm one of the teachers at high school. So the survey that's on that FremontUnifiedForward.org website, is this something that teachers would fill out also, or would, like you said in this slide, a teacher rep would be serving their own teachers and then be one person representing all the teachers somehow?
Well, what we want to do is we want everybody to kind of work as a team to basically fill out their individual survey. So we're assuming that basically the programs and education, whoever's on that committee, would work together to basically jointly fill out that survey, you know, and they would basically be the agreement of how that represents essentially the district. We would like to have some collaboration on that because we want to have what that site feels represents in their perspective. I think it's going to be difficult for us to kind of go through and have one party say, you know, oh no, we want this, or another party saying that. And we're hoping that we basically kind of get a group effort in order to basically get us the information that we need for all 3 of these tracks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Brian?
Actually, I wanted to ask if the committee would let the presentation complete and hold all questions to the end, because he might answer some of the questions, and that may, I'm hoping that'd be more efficient.
Is the committee interested? We're out of time, so is the committee interested in extending? Douglas, how long do you think this presentation would take?
I think maybe about another 5-6 minutes. It's going to be pretty short in the back.
So the CBOC had a reasonably lengthy discussion afterwards, based on the asks of the CBOC. So it may be more than that.
Okay, I'm here for as long as you need me. So I basically kind of block off the evening, so it's your guys' call.
My understanding is there's interest in who from FAC will participate in this project.
Okay.
Part of the conversation, right? So just
Yeah, I mean, I think we are from our standpoint, we're setting up 3 tracks based on what we feel we need to get in the survey, but we're obviously looking for the district to kind of figure out who's going to best represent these tracks. Our suggestions are here, and again, everything we present is, you know, this plan is not baked in stone. Obviously, it's, you know, malleable. You know, we can make adjustments as needed, but that's a process as we kind of visualize it thus far.
yeah, well, I'll let you finish walking through it, but I just wanted to give Antonio and the committee heads up that there may be some discussion about who participates or how we participate.
So, and Antonio, can I ask if we extend the time just for a total of 15 minutes to include the question and answers that you all may have after his presentation?
Yes, I would want a voting member to make a motion to that effect, because it's a large amount of time, and so I want to put it to the committee if that's what they're interested in.
I'll make a motion to extend the time 15 minutes.
That's Liz, right?
Yes.
Second?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor of extending for 15 minutes to include the presentation and Q&A, please raise your hands. Thank you. Please lower your hands. All opposed? Great, thank you. Go ahead, Douglas. And so we will entertain the presentation in full before we take questions and move to discussion. And I'll have 15 minutes. Go ahead, Douglas.
I'm on a board that basically votes in Slack. We got to go with the raise hands deal. That's definitely a lot more efficient. In terms of kind of like the process, in terms of how it works by site, the first step after we kind of get everybody in and get site registration.
Sorry, could I encourage everyone to mute who's not speaking? Okay, I think we've eliminated that. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. So basically, each of these three committees will basically go through and fill out a questionnaire. Our thought on that is, everybody would collaborate on a Zoom or Teams call. They would work together and go through and basically complete the survey. The survey, I'll go through the survey tool in a moment. It'll take roughly about half hour or so per site, give or take. After we basically get the information collected on the survey, we are going to schedule essentially a site visit, meaning that we're going to go out to the site and we're going to look at some of the items identified in the survey. Now, because of the world that we're living in, we're not quite out of the pandemic, we're separating basically the interview process entirely basically from the site visit process. And we would like the site visits to be set up at a time where it's convenient for you guys to when there's no students on campus. And we will look at some of the things that are basically identified basically within the survey as, hey, can you take a look at this, or can you check this out? And we'll do that. And the idea is about 2 weeks basically after the questionnaire is completed and that site visit is done, we would like to then sit down with each team basically via Zoom and go through and discuss the survey and say, hey, it looks like you've identified some of these issues. We saw some of these issues up at the site. And go through and basically kind of talk through those items and basically kind of develop out, again, a quick summary of here are some of the issues and the challenges. Here's what we think we've basically resolved from the last master plan update. Here's what we feel are basically is open or should be addressed in the current update. And that information is going to go directly inform an updated site profile, which is going to be the result of this process. We'll create a draft of, hey, we came out to this campus. This is what we heard. This is a summary of issues. And after that, we'll definitely be kind of iterative back and forth of, this is what we've heard. You'll tell us, hey, that's right, or no, we want X, Y, Z. And I think after a couple 3 rounds with that, we'll go through and finalize basically the profile for each of the sites. And of course, that will roll up into be the complete site plan, or I'm sorry, the complete overall master plan update. Any questions on that before I kind of move into a little bit more detail?
Sorry, we'll take questions at the end just to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just keep moving through. My bad. So again, I think some of you have dived into the website. I noticed about 20 people within district have registered. It looks like successfully set themselves up with a password, and some have actually have completed the registration survey. I'm going to do, I think for the interest of time, just do one slightly thing just a little bit different over here, and that is I will pull up the actual site itself. All right, so once you're in the survey portal, we provide pretty much detailed instructions of, hey, everything I'm talking about right now in terms of how to walk through this thing, including the stakeholder groups. When you go through the registration survey, which is basically the first process, you'll be taking essentially to the actual survey itself. From here, you'll pick whatever school you're at. And essentially for each group, for example, program education committee, just the first and last names, essentially the cell phone number you can easily get a hold of them at, as well as email addresses. And that will basically kind of go through and say that, tell us that, hey, for these stakeholder groups, these are the people that you want us to talk to, and that will allow us to basically communicate with those people going forward. Let me kind of back up on that. And then as the teams are basically formed up, each stakeholder group basically has their own survey. So I'm just going to click on the education program survey. And if folks can see that. So I'm just going to type in a quick email address. So you put your email address basically to register in. select your school, confirm that basically you're part of the right group. Oops, stuff right there. And you basically start taking the survey. And the survey is set up in Google Forms, which I think a lot of you are basically familiar with. Some questions in terms of this, evaluating physical conditions, are relatively straightforward. Other questions, as you kind of go through and get into it, I'll invite folks to kind of go to the site, are kind of more specific to fill out the form. I'm going to actually now switch over to the slightly long-headed version of it. But we'll kind of ask general rankings basically in terms of various use types, in terms of impact on the space. We'll get into a discussion. We'll basically show what the previous campus priorities were that were identified 5 years ago, and ask the questions. Hey, is this still open? Has this been resolved? Is this something that basically still needs to be addressed? And we'll list those items out. We'll basically ask you to say, well, what are your current campus priorities, and identify up to 5 items that are in there. And then we also have some 3 or 4 questions to basically kind of go through and capture the items that you may not be able to have in there. But the nice thing about this is everybody's going to be asked the exact same question. Everybody gets to fill it out the exact same way, which again greatly allows us to kind of go through and correlate the data and say, hey, these sites seem to be doing better in some areas, but these sites basically might be doing or have a little bit more challenges in the same areas as well. And that allows us to kind of metricate the data and basically better quantify it as well. All surveys are basically very similar to each other. Once that's done, the other thing we want people to do is to go complete basically site plan markup. And if you go to the Google Drive over here, we'll have all the site plans loaded up. When I say site plan markup, it's just going to give you a current plan essentially of your space. And everything's basically already framed up in the PowerPoint slide. So if something here is not correct, for those of you who are familiar with PowerPoint, it's easy to kind of go through and annotate, say this has changed to something else. If those people are not comfortable with PowerPoint, you can easily just print it out and mark it up by hand. That lets us know essentially areas that may have changed essentially on your campus in the last 5 years, as well as any problem areas can be noted on this. And then once we have that information, we'll go out and visit the site, and then you can basically go through and calendar and book essentially your interviews with us. And it's basically a simple online system. We basically have slots available. It's first come, first served. You basically pick a slot, and we'll automatically send out a Zoom invite, and we'll know essentially that is this school, that is just basically team. We'll have all the information ready to go, and we'll go through and basically go through the survey results, the findings, and again, we'll basically begin to determine what are the items that might be open from the previous master plan update, and what are the new items that basically are there. And then this is an explanation of what happens next. And of course, we do have a support email as well. And a lot of us, there's actually about 5 of us that are basically responding to email. We've been using it a lot to kind of help people kind of get to the initial login. There was an issue when some of the registration emails couldn't get through the district firewall. It's been resolved, but that's kind of a long and the short of kind of like the overall process, trying to make it simple, easy, hopefully straightforward for people to use. And we recognize that, again, not everybody's quite back at the site yet, and especially with vacations coming up, people might be located in a lot of different places. So whether it's a laptop or a tablet, there's a lot of different ways for you to basically kind of access and go through and complete this information. So let me go back to the actual presentation itself here and minimize that. So I kind of walk through the website over here. I kind of walk through the survey tools. And, again, this is the last slide just for next steps. We're hoping that everybody can at least get into the site and log in terms of site lead. Everybody's received an invite to that, and just register to make sure, can you get in by this coming Monday? And then by the following Monday, we're hoping that everybody can get their team registered in terms of letting us know who the stakeholder groups are. And from there, through May and June, we'll start the process of doing the questionnaires and basically interviewing groups. And I think that basically kind of concludes my presentation, other than say that our goal is by the time we come back in fall is to have a good, reasonable draft plan that's been vetted a couple times. And then the idea is to basically finalize this before the year's out. So with that, I'll stop and happy to take any questions you may have.
Kelly, can you explain the ask of FAC to participation in this?
Yes. So as Douglas had explained, we're looking for the FAC to work with this larger body to actually put together a team of folks from FAC who would be willing to participate in working on the survey for the FAC as a committee, but also after the surveys are completed, be part of the larger body of the group that's going to actually be working to compile and update. And I hate to use the word prioritize because we're not doing a prioritization, but to really scrub the information and identify what areas are really significant and that need to be addressed collectively as a district, and look at the overall goals and make sure that, you know, we're on the mark, we're on target for what we intended to do, and to provide any input or update from the community perspective. So that would be the ask of the FAC tonight, is to identify those individuals. Originally we said 2, but I know that we could probably do 2 to 3 people, and of course have substitutes for those that can't, you know, do the full commitment. But that would be the ask that I would like to have us address this evening.
And how large would the larger body be?
I don't know, Doug, what would you say? Probably upwards of maybe 20 people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is we want to find, you know, 2 good representatives that are not district employees that basically, you know, to represent each site. You know, if you feel that, you know, somebody can represent multiple sites, that's fine, but we want somebody who's not a district employee, who's not part of administration or faculty, that can speak to how the community and how the end user space might see the school, and, you know, provide useful information basically back to the survey.
And Robert?
I'm a little bit confused about this larger group. Is that the long range facility plan group that you're talking about, 20 people? Are they going to
Yes.
build the plan itself?
They're going to revisit the plan, because remember, this is not a redo, this is an update.
Okay.
So we're just going to confirm that the original intent that was identified 5 years ago has been maintained. And if something has changed, it'll go through the vetting process to be verified that, yes, this is valid and we need to incorporate it into the new plan moving forward.
Okay, so then there'll be another group that follows this, you know, if
Thank
you're
you.
going to go for a bond or what have you.
Correct. That's a whole separate process.
Okay, thanks.
Brian?
So I have a proposal that perhaps we provisionally have the kind of LRFP demographic subcommittee provisionally work on staff with this, and that but that we officially adopt our representation at our next meeting, 5/12. And the provisional part of it will be, you know, looking at the survey, you know, and figuring out more specifically how we slot in, so the whole committee, so everybody in the committee knows what they might be signing up for, and has an equal chance to ask to be a part of this.
So if I can say, should simply say that I think all of you have access or can get access to the site now, and you can all go in and you can take a look at the survey tools. They're all up, they're posted. You can kind of see what's going on with them now, if that helps you guys out.
But what I maybe misunderstood. I thought the goal was for one survey result from the FAC, or are you looking for survey results from all members of the FAC?
No, we're basically looking for essentially 3 surveys basically per site. You know, one from programs and education, one for maintenance operations, one for community. But if folks want to go in and take a look at the actual survey tool, you know, they can.
So FAC is not like a particular across the whole district. So I think how you engage with us will have to be a little bit, may have to be a little bit different.
Yes, we're making the assumption that FAC basically might be the body best responsible for assigning essentially who the representatives might be basically per site.
So I think, Brian, what Doug is saying is that we're
Mhm.
hoping that FAC, whoever you guys agree upon as the committee to represent yourselves, you all would be the appropriate body that would represent district-wide issues and not just a particular site.
And so I
If that
have
makes
a,
sense.
yeah, we can do further discussion. I just have a motion. I want to hear if there's a second. On Brian's motion.
And again, that was provisionally have the LRFP demo subcommittee work with staff and come back with a full recommendation for how FAC enters into this process, and we adopt official representatives at that time on 5/12.
Right. So do I have a second for Brian's proposal?
I'll second. It's Henry.
All right, thanks. So that's Henry. I need unless we're going to go to vote right now because we've now completed the 15 minutes. I need an extension of time. Or alternatively, we'll move to vote on Brian's proposal. Hearing no extension of time. So we'll go ahead and vote on Brian's proposal. Or is Lisa, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had my hand up before the proposal. I still don't get it. So for me, looking at the format, what FAC is comprised of, I see union representative, teacher. I see staff from the district, trustee. Who are the community members? Me and I don't know who else. And what is our ability and knowledge to be able to represent all the different sides? And my concern, as always, and I'm always going to bring this up, is how much are we engaging with the community?
If you're going to move into discussion, then I would encourage you to extend time on this item.
Yeah.
Since we're at time. So if you want to extend time for some period of time and propose that, otherwise we have a motion and we've closed the amount of time on this item. So does that make sense? If you want a further discussion, we totally can. We just need to make a motion on that.
So do I need to make a motion on that?
Yeah. And I can help
Okay,
you
I make a
craft it.
motion to give 3 more minutes or 5 more minutes to this discussion.
I'll take that to be 5 more minutes to further this discussion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that, Henry.
Okay, I heard like a third and fourth. All right, so all in favor, please raise your hands. Please lower your hands. All opposed?
My hand's up, sorry.
That's fine. The ayes have it. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
So who are the community representatives that will have the capacity to understand all the sites and bring meaningful comments of the needs of that attendance area in that community? I need to understand how we can truly represent our children and our parents. And so if I took that job or that task, I would feel that, I live in a certain attendance area. I'm familiar with a certain high school, elementary, or middle school. I don't know if I could bring that level of knowledge to the other facilities. And I want to make sure that stays with community.
Sure.
And not like, people that are always, teachers, union. We really mean, when you say community, you're saying parents, right?
Right. So Luisa, I think to answer a part of your question, because I totally understand your concern and your question, you have to remember that the teachers and the administrators are already going to be addressing their concerns in the instruction and education sort of silo that's been created.
Correct.
So you won't have to sort of digest or try and interpret what that is, because they're going to already be part of that group and identifying what those issues are. You're not going to have to deal with trying to decipher what the facilities are, because the maintenance and operations, the custodial staff, transportation, and all those district operations that support physical activities of the district are already going to be answering those questions.
Correct.
So I believe from the community perspective, the value I believe that the parents and our PTAs and our different auxiliary committees will bring, regardless of what your attendance area is, the focus and the intent of what you all want for your students equilaterally across the board, you all as a group can identify that. And as we drill down into the report, the site by site specifics, information from the other people who are at the site and have identified those issues. So then you as the parent can then have a very comprehensive view of, hey, this is what goes on at Ardenwood and these are their issues. This is what goes on at Kennedy High School and this is their issue. What are the commonalities that have been identified at all the various sites that are consistent across the district that you all can actually provide input and say, yes, that's valid. Hey, I want to add this little piece to it as well. That's how I
my
see
my
your
main
role.
question was,
Yeah.
Kelly, is, for example, maybe a particular community like Irvington has Valhalla, they have a theater, maybe another school doesn't have a theater, but maybe that's not what they want. Maybe they want a sports field and track. And so
Right.
how do we just, in the vacuum of our FAC community, where I'm not talking to any of those parents or anybody else, how can I bring that and say, no, these people want a track and field, these people want a theater? I'm just saying, you know, I don't know how we're.
I think those questions and those points are going to be brought up when the principals
Okay.
and the administrators at the site, when we ask the question, what is your current program? Where are your strengths and weaknesses? What is your highest used facility? What are your outside facility uses at your site? I mean, those questions are going to sort of come to the surface and be very apparent once we gather that data. And it'll be revealed to us that, hey, this site is a theater site. This site is a sports site. This site is a music site.
Okay.
So it'll become a very organic process that we'll be going through. And I don't want you to get kind of apprehensive or scared, because it's just more information that now you'll have access to be able to be at the table, to have the conversation that, hey, this is what's important to us too, and be able to know what's going on.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Kelly, before
That's
I
all
move on
wanna
to
say.
the other questions, because we are nearly out of time, just to be clear and for the committee's sake, there is a motion on the floor that we will need to vote on once time expires, if it's not extended. So if there's 20 or so members of this body, and are there only going to be 2 to 3 community members of this 20-member body, and those will be the FAC like liaisons / representatives? Is that what the plan is
That is
currently?
the initial assumption. But if you guys think that there needs to be more representation or a different demographic, then we're leaving that up to you guys to tell us, hey, we want to have more, we want to have representation of these different people as well. And we will then consider that and incorporate that into the larger body that will then participate.
And one further question, how many surveys are we expecting from the community? How many survey responses are we expecting from the community for those representatives to use that information to even guide their representation?
So again, we're looking for one survey basically per site, and then I'll leave it up to the FACP and obviously the district to determine essentially who the best representatives are, but we're imagining that we'd have 2 representatives who are familiar with the needs of that site, you know, who are familiar with whether or not they want a theater or basically have a softball field. You know, that's how we get meaningful data basically into the update
I think
process.
in furthering Lisa's point, when you say there's 2 representatives per site, would that be like an MNO and a district employee, whether that's administration and...
So to be clear, each committee has basically 2 folks on it, at least. You know, you can basically have more if desired, but essentially would have the programs and education, which would have, you know, 2 folks on it, could have 3 folks on it. The maintenance operation, you know, committee would be, or stakeholder group would basically have, you know, at least 2 people on it. And the community group would have at least 2 people on it. You know, and each site would basically have 3 of these groups basically.
So you're
And
talking
then
about
sure,
6
sorry, go ahead.
individuals per
6.
site.
Yeah. And I think the M&O is pretty straightforward. You know, to me, in terms of the education programs, it normally is a principal and somebody who basically is a representative of the instructional side of the house, basically for the site. If other folks, you know, need to kind of go in there, what we don't want to have is just one voice driving everything. We want to have at least, you know, essentially, you know, agreement between 2 or 3 people that this represents this aspect of what we need, you know, for the site in each of these areas to make sure that we get that we generate good data out of it.
Right, and maybe, and I'll extend it to, I mean, we may need more time, or alternatively, you know, if there is no time, then we're voting on Brian's proposal. So what's the will of the committee? I understand it's late, and we may need to table, you know, the following item given the hour.
Ask a question, please, Antonio?
If it's a clarifying question, sure.
Yes, if Brian's motion were to pass to table this or to take it up on May 12th, how will that affect the work of AE3 partners in terms of proceeding forward? Does it hinder their work? Does it stop their work, or will it fall into the timeline to make this go smoothly?
So if I can respond to that, our hope is to kind of get all these groups set up basically in the next week and a half or so. So if you're saying that a decision can't be made to May 12th, obviously that's going to be a 1-month impact on getting this group set up.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I wasn't sure.
So I would recommend to the body that we further discussion, because I don't think the structure is yet clear to us. And if the goal is to actually either select, select representatives in somewhat of a more permanent basis, we would need to do that in this discussion, in this meeting, unless we're going to have, for example, an emergency meeting, which I don't imagine is the will of this committee, but I'm all ears. So barring that, do I have interest in an extension for time? Henry?
I mean, I can make a motion to extend the time for 10 more minutes, and maybe with that also move the ventilation report to the following meeting, because now that school is not starting like in person, we might be able to postpone that.
Sorry, there's no speaking to the motion in the motion, but
Okay.
Let's go ahead and just do the 10 minutes.
Okay.
So extend time for 10. Do I have a second?
A second, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Please, everyone, lower your hands. All in favor, please raise your hands. Please lower your hands. All opposed? All right, the ayes have it. I believe the next person in line was Diane, or Trustee Jones.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, if I'm understanding correctly, what you're asking for is how to identify parents at the site to fill those 2 community member roles at each site. Is that correct?
Well, the way I would say it is we need somebody who is not a district employee, 2 individuals that are familiar with the needs of the community. It could be a parent, it could be a part of the PTA, it could be somebody maybe that's on this committee that actually, you know, is basically relevant to that school site. You know, just somebody who is not a district employee that is familiar and kind of speak to the needs of the community there.
And so you need 2 people like that at each school site. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so why, if I'm recalling how this happened when we initially did the long range facilities plan, those folks came from PTA or site council at each site. It wasn't a body like this that did that. It was a decision made at each site, I think, by the administrator, who I think in most cases recruited from PTA and site council.
And from this standpoint, that's normal and that could perfectly work here. We just wanted, I believe, to defer to you guys just in terms of who would be the best picks for that. But to me, that'd be
And-
logical because that you're finding people that know the site and can speak to it.
Right. And I would want to ask Brian, because he was on the school board at the time, I believe. Brian, is that what your recollection is?
Well, so you're saying you want to create a 20-person body for 20-person body for every site for all 40 some odd sites?
So
20 times 40 people?
So speaking just from the needs, basically the study, we just need to have 2 people per site. It doesn't need to be a large 20-person body. It's just 2 people per site. 2 individuals that are not district employees that can basically speak to the external needs and factors for that particular site.
Okay, so we're mixing 2 things, which I think is confusing this body. And frankly, this is really an item that requires a lot more time than we agendized too. So I'm missing another engagement because of this as well. So but to answer your question, Diane Jones, or Trustee Jones, we had a steering committee, and then we had a 40-person community and staff group, and then every principal was in charge of representing their site. This is my opinion. I think that was one of the weaker parts of the previous plan, because it was up to the principal to make sure they got enough inclusion of the community in that part of the plan. So I do, from a survey standpoint and the requirements of the survey you guys are talking about, provided the local sites follow through and get good representation, I think it actually might be better than before. For the central body, that's a whole nother topic, and I don't want to mix it right now, but I'm just saying, like, I think, well, FAC has it really has no involvement with direct individual sites. So it's
Okay. And I would throw out just one other thing for consideration. I think from the purposes of the study, we're not looking or requesting that there basically a large central body. We definitely believe in kind of building things from the ground up, and having sites basically to have the discussion. So for us, it's more important to basically select these, 6 individuals, plus basically each site, including the 2 community representatives, because that's where we get the good data from.
Like I said, I do think it would be good for us to have a concrete discussion on May 12th about, how FAC is involved in this process and can plug in effectively. I don't.
So if I can also throw out a couple things here. Just because you make a decision in terms of who these groups are going to be in the short term, remember, this is just for initial data collection only. There's going to be plenty of opportunity over the coming months for people to involve themselves and basically look at the data. But part of it is we got to start from somewhere. I think what we're trying to do is we were hopeful to basically try to get a lot of these interviews and surveys done before the school year is out. I think it's unfortunately going to overlap in the first part of the summer, but basically we're trying to at least get the data collected so we have something to talk about. Basically, we have something to show you.
Yeah, and to jump in quickly before I move to the other questions, the FAC is a 14, 16 member body. We do represent several of the attendance areas, and we have other representatives on it, but we wouldn't, for example, be able to fill what are we looking at, like 40 sites, 2 community members per. We simply don't have 80 members. I don't know if we'd be asking, if we'd be being asked to represent multiple sites, like that wouldn't quite work. Were we being asked to be liaisons to find the community members
I think
for
it's
each
kind of
site?
like liaisons to find, and I think Trustee Jones kind of hit the nail on the head. If it's okay for a site principal to basically pull out a PTA lead or community lead, that to me would basically be individuals that know the site, that are external, that can basically provide good data for the purposes of this survey and update.
Got it. And I think given the amount of time that we had scheduled for this, and not having seen the proposal ahead of time, I don't think we're able to, I don't want to speak for the committee, but we're not able to provide a different approach than the one that Trustee Jones provided. I think Brian's point, though, is we would want to interplay with this process, not necessarily at the site level. And so that would be, determining FAC's involvement. in the May meeting. Is that correct, Brian? Before I turn to other questions?
Yes, I suppose my motion's still on the table and we can amend it to reflect that. I think.
Right, there is a motion on the table, so I don't want to speak over that. So we'll revisit that once we're done at these times. Robert?
So yeah, I was going to propose Diane, Trustee Jones' idea also. And second thing, again, because we can't go to 40 meetings ourselves. And another minor comment, when you're rating the facilities conditions, I would suggest having a standard because everyone's going to say their school is terrible.
We have a standard, which is one of the great things about having a survey process. You know, everybody's going to be filling out the exact same form the same way, and we do try to walk people through, you know, what we mean by things. And we also have not only just, you know, shall we say rankings, but just qualitative checks that allows us to kind of look at issues or ask the same question like 2 or 3 different ways, which allows us to kind of ferret out, okay, there's an issue here.
And so now I need to interpret Robert's motion. Are you substituting yours in place of Brian's? I mean, there is
No, this was to inform the survey. How's each site's committee going to fill out the survey in a consistent way that, you know, across the district?
Well, it's all in Google Forms. So literally, you know, the nice thing about setting up the Google Forms is, you know, we can constrain the input to a checkbox or, you know, to certain phrases or things like that. That's how we
Can FAC see the complete surveys? Because because I believe what's happening here is Robert's asking questions, giving you feedback.
Yeah.
And
so here's what I can do. I will send off to Kelly, you know, shall we say a PDF, which is kind of like a paper version of the survey so people can see what's being filled out. Because that might be an easier way for people to kind of go through and see what's on the actual survey, as opposed to going through and, you know, completing the mock one.
And let me see if I can now square both of these like potential motions. So Brian is asking for the long range facilities plan subcommittee to be that liaison to, you know, the advisors. If I'm understanding your motion correctly, Brian.
My motion was for that subcommittee to be the provisional liaison, facilitating a May 12th conversation where we officially adopt our strategy. Which doesn't necessarily mean it continues to be the subcommittee. But the provisional liaison to kind of set us up so we can get the permanent liaison and have as much of the right information, you know, much like our subcommittees bring forward the right information so we can make a good decision to do that again in this case.
Right. At the time you made your motion, and I'm not arguing against it, I want to remind you that, you know, then Sharon asked her question about the timing. We would need to find these representatives in the next week and a half. And then there's this potential other decision of principals choosing the site representatives, the community members at each site level.
So if we want to unwind the stack for the purposes of, well, that's why the subcommittee would be provisional. So it doesn't block the work. And we replace it with somebody else on the 12th, because I believe everybody should understand, and we want good people to sign up for this. And so that's the intent, is that the provisional status unblocks the work.
Okay, and so your proposal is not in conflict with the, like, for example, this idea of principals choosing community representatives for their sites.
I think that's a separate issue.
Got it. Okay, in that case,
I would love to resolve my motion.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that they weren't in conflict. We're now out of time, so that would push us to resolve Brian's motion. I'm calling on Henry because he has his hand up.
Yes. Do you need an motion, or can I say the question now?
If you want to discuss or make further clarifying questions, then we need to extend for time.
Okay, I guess I'll put a motion for extend for 5 more minutes for further questions.
Okay. And does anybody second that?
I'll second.
Thanks, Robert.
Can I friendly amendment that we start, that we finish the first motion before moving on to questions about the second potential motion?
Yes, there is no, I mean, now that there's no conflict, I think
Okay.
we should definitely move to resolve this question. All right, so Henry is asking to extend for 5 more minutes. All in favor, and I have a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Please lower your hands. All opposed? Thank you. All right, so the ayes have it. Keep in mind that if you would like to draw something to a vote and stop discussion, you can call the question. That's a pretty standard motion. Liz.
I want to call a question then.
Sorry, I need to have recognized you, but so I would raise your hand if I were you. Liz, go ahead.
I'm trying to remember who's on the subcommittee.
Currently, it's you, Brian, and Henry, and I'm ex officio. So I would say since it's 2 to 3, it would be the 3 of you.
So for the next month or so, we're going to be involved in some sort of a process, taking up how much time, I wonder?
Great question.
We would need staff to give us an idea of how much time is involved between now and May 12th. Again, this isn't filling out surveys. This is the other part of the process.
I don't imagine that we would be expending more than 2 to 3 hours. And that is, just in you all completing, reviewing, and providing input on any questions or analysis of information that we get. Because as Doug stated, once we get the information back from all of the sites, we will be compiling the data, and I will have this body be an active participant in that evaluation of that information. So that is where the main sort of time consumption comes. And I don't want to say, oh yeah, it's only going to be 2 days worth of work. I have no idea what is coming back from these sites and these surveys. So I would anticipate we could at least assume that we'll have at least 2 to 3 1-hour meetings addressing those issues. So that would be the expectation that you can anticipate in participating in the next steps beyond just the initial survey.
This would be between now and May 12th is what you're identifying as 2 to 3
No,
hours?
between now and May 12th is like anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. And then what I'm talking about is the time frame from May to sort of end of September.
Got it. So back to Liz's question, it could be as short as 30 minutes to the extent, the liaisons want to do more work, they can up that, commitment, but that's quote unquote the expectation. I do think Brian might have something else in mind, but I'll let him speak as to it. Brian?
The only thing beyond that would be additional work, taking that information and preparing it for a discussion on the 12th, where we would officially select who would continue, right? Where it'd be very clear how much effort it is, and everybody would have a clear view of it, and everybody be able to, those who want to raise their hand having that clear view can.
Got it. So do you call the question?
Oh yes, I would like to call the question. Thank you.
All right, do I have a second? So that means we'll move to vote if this call the question works or is passed rather. Do I have a second for his motion?
Second.
Got it. All right. So all in favor of calling the question, which means we'll immediately move to a vote if this motion passes, please raise your hand. Thank you. Please lower your hands. All opposed? That would further discussion, for example. All right, so now we can go ahead and move to vote on Brian's proposal. So just now we voted on calling the question. So now we're actually voting on the proposal. And so it would be appointing the members of the Long Range Facilities Plan Subcommittee to work between now and May 12th on this process to present, a more outlined strategy on May 12th. And so that May 12th would be when we select potential permanent members to be those liaisons. Is that an accurate summary of your motion, Brian? Anything to add?
It cut out a moment, but I believe so.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, thank you.
I think you cut out a moment on me. So if you want to go ahead and restate the motion before we vote on it, I just want it to be clear.
What you stated was accurate.
Okay, got it. So now we'll go ahead and vote on Brian's proposal. So all in favor, please raise your hands.
Can you stop sharing your screen?
I can do that. I'm sorry.
Please lower your hands. All opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and that concludes this item. Thank you very much on that. Given the hour, I'd like to put, the idea to the body of tabling the ventilation report, but also distributing it for, oh no, you have it. So tabling the ventilation subcommittee report to the next meeting.
I make such a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor of tabling the ventilation subcommittee report to the next meeting, please raise your hand. Great. Please lower your hands. All opposed? Okay, thank you very much. The ayes have it. And I believe that brings us through all the items that we had on our agenda. Because we took thoughts on future meeting topics ahead of time, just as a forewarning, it seems like we'll have a pretty full agenda at the next meeting, May 12th, with long-range facilities plan and ventilation. Just a heads up. But other than that, I think that adjourns the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your patience once again, and have a great evening.
I actually have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa. Sorry.
I just think that it's too bad we adjourned the ventilation because we're still trying to reopen the schools before May or before April or before anything. And so I think that's an important piece. And maybe I would like to call a special meeting for discussion of ventilation because it's critical to, sharing the information that our schools are safe to reopen. So I'd like to make a motion to call a special meeting to discuss the ventilation as soon as possible. I don't know the scheduling, so I can't say a date.
Antonio?
Yes, go ahead, Sharon.
If I understood Louisa correctly, she is working under the assumption that we're returning to school and we are not.
That's to be determined.
No, I think that
Yeah.
decision has already been made, if I'm not mistaken.
It's not over. We are still asking
for the
for a return to
benefit-
school.
Totally understood. So for the benefit of the committee and the public, as of right now, the standing decision is to remain in distance learning till the end of the school year. Of course, there is summer school coming.
Yes,
I know
correct.
there's discussions about that, and the May meeting would precede the beginning of summer school. And then one other point I would note, Lisa, having done a lot of work on this report, I would have loved to have taken it up at this meeting, absolutely. But either way, you have a motion.
Yeah, I have a motion.
So do I have a second?
No second.
Okay, hearing no second, the motion fails. But thank you, everybody, for your time, and I will see you all on May 12th.
Thank you.
All right,
Good
have a
evening.
good night, everyone.